Do you eat, sleep, dream about anything related to eye care?
So do we. This is See What We See with Lauren and Martin. My name's Lauren Cashin.
And I'm Martin LeBeau. We want to share anything that's cool about eye care.
We want you to see what we see. So sit back and enjoy. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to See What We See with Lauren and Martin. Got to say hello, Martin.
Hi, Lauren. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Martin. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. We get to do something fun again today.
Yeah, I love doing these podcasts. And this one I'm looking forward to. We have that new column in our Focus magazine called Building Optical Legacies. And I think was a great idea. Actually, it was my idea, so I better rescind that comment. I don't want to pat myself in the back. But we discussed it. We thought that there's so much rich history for opticianry in Ontario, and for that matter, all of Canada. And it's not being recorded. It's not down on paper. And you and I have met so many icons in our industry that got us to where we are today. So, the new column, Building Optical Legacies, in the Focus magazine, we're trying to connect with people and families and companies that are part of our legacy. So it's great today that we're going to talk to a family who is huge in the Ontario opticianry, and it's the Raymond family. And for those of you who don't know, the Raymond family are 3 generations of opticians, and they've always been so involved, whether it's in the regulatory side, extremely involved in the association side. And it's a really cool story. We've got the article coming out in Focus this month, and we have the pleasure today to actually sit down with 2 members of the Raymond family and to hear it from their own mouths what their experiences are being part of an optical family spanning 3 generations.
Absolutely, Lauren. You're correct on this one. It's great to be able to sit with people that have opticianry at heart, and they've had it since a really, really young age. And you were mentioning earlier that it is important, I think, that we start talking about these family legacies and even these opticians or people in our industry that left something behind or still working really hard towards it, but maybe not everybody knows the story. We don't want these to become legends. We actually want to record these, and for the future generation to understand that the reason why they're here is because of all the hard work these people did in the past. And I can think of a better family than the Raymond family. I mean, I remember starting 20 some years ago, and Kevin is one of the first opticians that I met. And, coming to the shows, I always saw Mark, I always saw Pat. I did not know Mark really, really well. I kind of knew Pat a little bit because they're always very friendly and always willing to help, always willing to share their knowledge and their passion. And I think that's why we can ask for a better podcast and better guests on our podcast today. So without further ado, why don't you introduce our guest for today, Lauren?
Thank you, Martin. So I'm thrilled today to introduce our 2 guests as part of our Building Optical Legacies journey that we're going on. We'd be really remiss if we didn't talk about the Raymond family. You guys have just, you've played a part in this industry so much. So I want to introduce Patricia Raymond, who we call Pat, and Kevin Raymond. And I think we should start by having them tell us a little bit about themselves, what they're up to these days. So, Pat, why don't we start with you?
Okay. Well, I'm still dispensing. I tried retirement for the better part of a year, and I hated it, and went off and got my first COVID haircut and came home with a job. So I have been working at Olsen Optical at Yonge and St. Clair in Toronto for the last almost 2 years,
Cool.
Enjoying it thoroughly. I've done 9 or 10 years with the association, and I'm now enjoying semi-retirement. I've just gone part-time. So I'm still working, still enjoying it, love every minute of it. Just need a few minutes for me too.
Great, Pat. So we're going to dive into a little bit more of your experience with the association because you played a very big role in the OADO and the OOA, and all that. So Kevin, so tell us about yourself.
Well, I became an optician and licensed in 1985. I feel like I've pretty well been in this business all my life, as far as even after grade school, hanging around my dad's store, getting in his way. I enjoy every facet. I do have the luxury of being on both sides. I've done the retail for about 20 years, and now for another 20 years, I've been doing the manufacturing side with Carl's Ice Vision. Been very enjoyable, and it's my timing. I couldn't be more fortunate to see the changes in the optical industry and lens designs and products that are now available to dispensers now. So I enjoy talking about that and helping other opticians learn more about the technologies that are out there.
Cool, thank you.
I mean, Lauren, I have to say this before we actually go further in the podcast. I mean, we know that Mark and Patricia and Kevin has always helped us out over the years at any OOA functions and everything else. But personally, I have to thank Kevin, because probably close to 20 years ago, before I joined the association, Kevin and we used to work together. I was the student optician. Kevin was my mentor. And Thursday nights was a late night that we're usually ordering a pizza and with the same toppings all the time. And we had this different conversation. And he's the one that taught me about really the difference between the College of Opticians and the association. And it's because of Kevin that actually I volunteered 1 year at one of the shows. Oh. And I've been hooked ever since. And now we're here close to 20 years into it. And Kevin really basically opened the path for me and make me become the executive director that I am today, actually, with the OOA. So thank you, Kevin.
I've been very proud to watch you grow with the association. It's been fun to watch.
Thank you.
Really neat. I didn't know that, Martin. I knew you had connections because of, was that through Sam Thomas's practice?
That's right. We're working with Brooke and Braddock's on 2917 Bloor Street West.
Yeah.
On Thursday evening.
They moved me up to 3101 Bloor.
That's right. That's right.
I followed some big footsteps too, because that's where Malcolm Ladigan was, who ran the Guild of Opticians as well.
There's a name from the past. Yeah, Malcolm. Yeah. Great guy. Really good. Yeah, in fact, I used to work, my first dispensing job, because it's about me now, this podcast, was at Scarborough Town Center when it first opened. And Malcolm was the managing optician at Eaton's Optical there when I went to work. So I would have coffee with him, and, it was a quiet mall. It would have opened. So I got to know Malcolm. And I think he might have taught at Ryerson too when I was there, if I'm not mistaken.
Might have.
Yeah. Anyhow, we can go down so many rabbit holes, eh? The four of us have been in this for a long time, and, we get four of us together. We could just talk all afternoon. So we should start at the beginning with your family, where your family first got into this. Martin, do you want to kick it off? Or?
Well, I mean, I probably don't know as much as you do, Lauren, but I know that the Raymonds always been an optical family. So maybe you guys can start talking and really, I mean, it starts with your dad. How did it all started? We know you had a store, but that's all I know, really, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, Dad started, actually, he worked for Imperial Optical in Ottawa at the Imperial Optical Lab when it was still owned by Percy Hermont, the founder. His dad started off just sweeping floors and then eventually doing deliveries, and made his way, watched what was going on, learned the whole optical curve, and eventually working in the lab. And then I would say early 50s, they offered him the opportunity to open up an Imperial lab in Pembroke, Ontario, which he accepted, and he picked up his little family and brought them to Pembroke, and that's where I was born, and Kevin as well. And he ran the Imperial Optical Lab for a number of years prior to getting his optician's license. Opticians weren't licensed when he moved to Pembroke. They offered him grandfathering to become an optician, and he totally refused. That wasn't his way. He went to Ryerson and he took the course and got his optician's license after being, 25, 30 years out of high school.
Wow.
So we're pretty proud of him. He went on to get his contact lens certification and his status in artificial eye fitting. Towards the end of the 60s is when he opened his first store. I think Kevin was 5. And it was wonderful from there on in. I started working with him as a part-time after-school job when I was about 15, and watched him fit contacts, watched him fit artificial eyes. And I think pretty much from that time, I decided that was the career I wanted as well.
So Kevin, when
Yep.
what are your earliest memory about how you got into the business? At 5, you might have gone and hung out at the store and that, maybe played with formers, stacking them or something, separating them by color, who knows, whatever a kid would do in an optical store. So what are your earlier memories of how the family?
My dad, to keep me out of his hair in the lab, would give me a very special job of removing all the hidden hinges from the plastic frames. I had to heat them up and pull the hinges off, and then he'd get me filing the pins off. And I ran down every day at 3:30 when grade school ended, and did that every day with Dad. Then he got smart, made me get a paper route, so I stopped, got out of his hair for a while. But that was one of my earliest memories of always being in the store. And it was quite enjoyable. From there, I know my dad, he commented that none of his kids listened to him, and he did his best to make sure I wanted to be an optician, and even had one of his friends who was a guidance counselor in high school tried to send me in different directions. And I'm like, nope, I want to be an optician, and that's all I want to do. So I got my name in with Georgian College and got accepted there, and then did this from there.
If I can add to that, on the grand opening day of Dad's first store, they interviewed Kevin. He was 5, and they asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up. And he said an optician, just like his dad.
Wow. Cool.
But a non-working one.
Yes. Well, I wasn't sure if you wanted me to go the whole route there.
I didn't want, but
He wanted to be an optician, just like his dad, but not like his dad. He wanted to be the boss kind that didn't have to work.
So you want to be an owner, not in the trenches. Right?
Yep.
I guess you saw Mark as well starting in the business a little later on, because from what I understand, Mark was a little bit older than you guys. How did you see that coming? How did you feel about this? Then, okay, my older brother he's going to be becoming an optician as well. He's starting a business as well. And you guys following in the footsteps, really, of the family footsteps.
Well, actually, Mark got his optician's license before Dad did.
Oh.
He was in one of the very first classes where they were going to license opticians in Ontario. I think he was licensed a year or 2 before Dad. And Dad said, well, if my son can do it, I can do it. But I can remember Mark going to the lab the Imperial lab as a teenager after school and helping out. I used to drop by and I would see not Mark, but I'd see Dad sitting on a stool, cutting glass lenses by hand with a pair of pliers.
Wow.
And I was intrigued. Yes. Just hair cutting pliers, and he was making lenses, and then he'd feather them and bevel them, and there we went. And Mark would be there. Mark was working on the edgers, manufacturing the lenses, and it was just so exciting. And I think I was just a kid then myself. So, yeah, Mark was around right from the Imperial Optical stage, and then moved to Ottawa, where he also worked for Imperial, and then got a job with Standard Optical, which was the retail division of Imperial, working for Shorney's. And they offered him a position in Kingston, where he went and opened first Shorney's store in Kingston. A year later, he moved down the street and opened up Mark Ephraimo Opticians. So, and now it's still flourishing, even though we've lost Mark. His business is still doing very well. It's being run by his son Courtney, and yeah, it's been full circle.
Cool. So Kevin, when you think back about your big brother, Obviously a mentor, somebody to look up to. Do you have any silly story to tell? but what are your memories of Mark opening the store? The big brother.
As far as him opening the store, I was probably too young to learn that. But then when he became chairman of the board of ophthalmic dispensers, that's when I really saw what he could do and how involved he was in the business. And that piqued my interest a little bit too, and probably gave me the drive to join with the associations or do whatever I could, to help with the industry. But one of the things he did, I asked him a question. Actually, I think it was in Pat's apartment about dissimilar segs. I don't think a lot of people even know about that anymore or would even consider that thought.
Yeah.
But he pulled out a pen and a piece of paper and he drew it all out. Like, he learned his craft very well. And I said, this is stuff I'm going to have to really remember. Sometimes in school you think, I don't need to know this. You really do. And it came in handy many times after that for me. But I was shocked that he pulled out a pen and paper and gave me a whole lesson on dissimilar segs. And for a guy that had been in the business for a long time, you'd think that would have been forgotten, but no.
That was Mark.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about Mark, I just want to interject with some of my experience, because he was somebody that I looked up to a lot. And, I think back in my first memories of when I first met him and saw him. And I think the first time could have been during the Schwartz Commission, when they were looking at who was going to make the cut to be the regularly health professions. And I remember at the Holiday Inn over by Yorkdale having a meeting, and we would always see Mark and Robin Searle up at the front of the room. And I used to sit there and think, how do these guys know so much what's going on? And, and the laws and, whatever. And then I remember another time we're at another hotel and Mark's up there and they're telling us, I'll remember this one thing they talked about that day when he stood there and said to college, if you even put a screw in a frame, the optician must be the one to take the frame back out to the patient in case you change the adjustment of the frame. I can still picture sitting there, and I know the hotel off the 400 near whatever, right? So anyway, Mark was always impressed me as to his knowledge, not only as an optician, but the political scene for opticianry, and just the way he represented us. When they were going to take away our right to refract back in, February, March of 2001, when we were told to stop refracting for those of us who were. And the college did something. We all went down to do dissertations. And at the time, I remember the association hired Mark to write the piece and stand up and talk to the college along with everybody else. And he really defended us really, really well. And that was a really bad day for a lot of us, because they did go ahead and say that we should stop refracting, right? So because of that day, we then went to an AGM. And now I just want to kick in some with Kevin here. So there was an AGM, and it was downtown. It was probably being held during a Vision Canada event. And we were in the room, and we're all sitting there. And Kevin, you were the only person on the little stage sitting at the table. There was no other directors there. And Robin Searle stood up, and as he could do, Robin, he berated everybody in the crowd. And he kept saying, look at Kevin. And you remember that, Kevin? And he was yelling at us to get off our asses and we should. And I'm a guilt person. So I got up and ran up. There must have been 10 of us, 15 of us ran up, Stephen Sanger, myself, Herb Diesler. I'm just trying to remember the picture, right? And we all ran up there and we'll do it. And of course, then we had our first meeting at the offices. You were president, Kevin, and it dropped down pretty fast, the number of people, but I watched you there, and that got me really interested. And the following fall or so, I became president, and it was 2001 and these are things that, that I think in my career, you got up there and we did a minute of silence for the 9/11 and for your dad. So your dad had just passed away. So that was it. So, here I'm going on and on, because I got to say, your family has such an influence on me. And the first person I called when I became president was Mark. I phoned him. I said, Mark, I don't know what I'm supposed to do as president. He said, well, first of all, you got to go down and join this conservative club down at Queen's Park or something and go to functions. And he scared me off. I said, I'm not, because I was still shy in those days, believe it or not. I didn't know what to say. And I hung up the phone and I phoned Nick Atkinson, and the rest is history. And Nick talked me into staying and all that. He says, just do whatever you want and apologize later. That was the way he said it. So again, between yourselves, I really, we go back to here I go. We're back to the 80s on Avenue Road and that upstairs office there, Pat. I believe you were president at the time.
I remember it very well. Very, very well. And poor Betty the secretary. But yes, I was president for 3 terms, the first of which was when we were working on the RHPA. And that was an experience, one that I was very happy to do it. And I don't regret doing it, but that was quite the experience, working on the RHPA and working with the group of opticians from out west who were trying to fight us and knock us down. But we got through really well, again, with a lot of advice from my older brother and the support of my younger brother. It was a great 9 years.
And I'll give Pat a little bit of a compliment because she doesn't give herself any. Back then, when she was president of the association, we didn't have the membership support or the financial support. And Pat worked hard. We had mailings where we did envelopes ourselves, everything. We licked the stamps. We did all that to save money because there was no money for the association. And I think it was with her efforts and with you two as well, that now we have a fantastic support, and a lot of more members than we did back then. I think the support originally came from when Imperial was around. Our Standard Optical, as they declined, they stopped paying memberships, so people weren't reaching into their own pockets. So Pat kept the association alive back then, I think. So just a little kudos for her as well on that one.
Thank you.
Mark started it and Pat kept it going. And now it's still.
I have to say, I did make the first big increase in membership prices, and I got a lot of kickback for that. Not kickback, backlash from that. Kickback, I swear.
No. I mean, wow, you got kickbacks, huh?
There's the money.
So did Mark when he rose optician's fee to $250 with the board.
$250.
So both of you were involved for many, many years with the association, and I'm sure that each of you had your own challenges while you were the association. Can you maybe just tell us a little bit what the challenges were at that time compared to what you see today?
For me, again, I think the biggest challenge was working on the RHPA. It was a huge challenge without an awful lot of support from the membership, I'm sorry to say, because we didn't have a big membership. And of course, like today, most of what we do is not out in the open. Membership doesn't see how hard you're working. And I found that difficult. I didn't want to say we're working really hard, but at the same time, you want them to know that. And that was one of the biggest challenges.
Well, we didn't have social media and computers to communicate in an easy way.
Not at all. And paying the bills wasn't easy because we didn't have the membership.
We had about 250 members back in 2000.
Yeah. And I was in the 90s. So we had even less. Challenges aside, it's an experience that I would do. Well, don't get me wrong. That I don't regret.
You keep putting your hand up here?
That I don't regret. I enjoyed every minute of my time on the association, working with other opticians and finding out more and more about the politics of it all and the laws. And it was a real experience. And I would recommend it to every optician out there. Get your name on the ballot and get yourself nominated onto the executive, because it's really a thrilling job. Underappreciated, but thrilling.
I think the reward for most of us at the end of the day, again, is is seeing people smile when they come to these events and being happy to be there. That's payment on its own, I think, at the end of the day. But again, Lauren and I, we eat it, we breathe it, we do everything with it because we just enjoy it so much. All right. Well, what about you, Kevin? What was it during your term as president and your association with the association?
I think there was many various challenges that were always there. One of the ones, fighting against groups that didn't seem to appreciate or want opticians. Wanting opticians deregulated, and there was a lot of confusion and misinformation to a lot of people. A lot of people didn't understand the difference between the College of Opticians and the Opticians Association. Spent a lot of time trying to make sure that, we're your voice, and, everyone felt that the college was trying to get rid of opticians, or, the increase in fees were making it prohibitive, which we all understand the reasoning for the fees, but it does hurt when that comes up. Sorry, I'm kind of lost for words on this one.
Well, Kevin, I'll bring up something that I know you worked very hard on, and that was the MCSS schedule for which has always been a huge problem for us. We just recently had it redone. Well, it's been a few years now, I guess, but that was still what you had negotiated from.
I think we got a 19.2% increase. And that came in the day before an event. So I was able to stand up at an AGM and actually announce that to everybody. But it was a 19.2% increase. And that was not an easy thing to do. That took a lot of time.
Getting money out of governments are just, because we were still on that fee schedule, as you know, until just a few years ago. And I worked with an optometrist and the ministry on that. And you'll see the frame allowance is still the same one you negotiated. Yeah, it's the same one. But at least they took off Hardex, hardening glass lenses. They had that still on the thing there, and they had no progress. They had nothing that we deal with today. And we had gone down previous to that, and the ministry would say, if you've come down here to ask for money, forget it. If you want to talk about smoother protocols, but at least it has caught up now, and it's a fair price now, except for the frames, right? So the poor patients are bumping up. So yeah. So Kevin, so you worked hard on behalf of opticians to have that done, and opticians are still enjoying it now because, well, I guess the previous one, that was the first one where a patient could come to any optician who participated. Remember, they used to just tender it out and the cheapest company would get it. And all the patients would have to go to central spots, whether it was down at Yonge and Bloor. So I know there was a place there that people had to go. And so, you're probably know, Pat, maybe you helped negotiate that in the 80s. I don't know, or Mark or somebody.
Not at all. I think Kevin did the very first one and it was successful in 91. And then renegotiated in 93. I remember it so well. He worked his buns off.
And just a side comment. Yeah. The one sneaky thing I did was when I had the fee schedule printed, because he didn't have all the social media and emailing and texting and stuff like that, I had it printed on fluorescent pink paper, so you couldn't photocopy it and give it to all your friends. You had to be a member of the association to get that.
Funny. That's so true. I do remember the reason.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah,
that's great marketing. Actually, that's awesome marketing.
You wouldn't get away with that now because then only members would be able to have the prices, right?
Yeah.
But that that fluorescent pink paper was still sitting on a desk in my store just a few years ago. We laminated, that same piece was always there. So when you're saying it, I'm having these deja vus of just a few years ago even.
Yeah, that wasn't a fashion choice. That was a you can't photocopy it choice.
Yeah, cool.
Well, all it just told me right there is that Lauren might be a little bit of a hoarder. Maybe it's time for you to get rid of that pink piece of paper, Lauren, or frame it and put it on the wall, one or the other.
Well, as you can see behind me here, I'm the hoarder because I'm slowly bringing everything from my office, which my son says, clean it out, clean it out. They want to use it as a lunchroom, but it is just full of stuff like that. I just can't. I feel it's the history of our profession, all that stuff. The and all the little instruments that some of the older opticians have given me over the years. And that's why, if you guys ever have an idea where we can come up with a museum, I think we deserve a museum of Ontario opticianry, and we've got lots to put in it. Whether it's paperwork, books, equipment, all the instruments. George Adamson gave me stuff that's so cool that I'd love to, because my wife says, what are we going to do with all this when you're gone?
We should talk to Mark's family as well, because that was a dream of Mark's. Mark wanted to open up a optical museum as well, and I know he collected a lot of stuff over the years. I should bug Courtney one day about that, see what's still there.
So now you just mentioned Courtney, so we really should be bringing that up, because Courtney's third generation, right? So Courtney is your nephew. So do you guys have anything to add with Courtney? We know he's doing a wonderful job. He's keeping the tradition going in Kingston with Mark at Raymond Optician. What are your memories with Courtney? Did you mentor Courtney, you guys?
Not really. Courtney went right under Mark's wing. I know he was a year behind me in school, but things at Georgian College, I think, were in a big change at that time. So he did his own thing and did it with Mark, and obviously did it well. He's a very low key guy. He doesn't make his face all over everything. He just plugs away, does his job, and does it well.
And you mentioned that he was just slightly behind you at Georgian. So you've got your family has a really unique spread between births. So your nephew is 2 years younger than you, or
a year and a half
younger than you. So that's kind of interesting how your parents spread it out, just I guess to make it easy. A lot of people wait to make sure one kid's out of diapers, but they have the next one. But your parents waited like a long time.
They had built-in babysitters.
Mark,
okay.
He had a hard time getting a babysitter for me, so they could go to Mark's wedding.
We went to Mark's wedding, and that was the first time Mom had left Kevin with a babysitter. He was 10 months old.
Wow.
But he and Courtney were, I think, pretty close growing up because their age was so similar. We went on a few family vacations, and the two little boys in their strollers.
And Jason as well.
And Jason, Jason came along after the big trip, I think. I think Kevin knows Courtney as an optician a little bit more than I do. I know all the Courtney stories when he wasn't working, but I know his biggest mentor, I think one of his biggest mentors was Robin Searle and Doug Frudeman.
Oh, I remember him too.
Yeah.
So Kevin, your wife Diane is an optician. Did you meet her before she became an optician, or did you meet her within the industry?
We met probably about the second or third day at Georgian College. When we became optician, or when we went to Georgian, the age of majority had changed, but they forgot to drop the age back down. Like the age to vote and drink, I think, went up to 21. And then they dropped everything down to 19. But to become an optician, they forgot to change that. You had to become 21.
Oh.
And Bill Ardern, the professor at the time, asked who was under the age of 19. And we were both, half the class was, but only my wife Diane and I think we were the only ones that originally put up our hands. I said, well, there's somebody my age. I'm going to go hang around with her. And I never stopped hanging around with her. We both became opticians. Our license numbers are pretty close together.
And did you go to school with Courtney since you guys were a similar age as well?
No, he was the year behind me.
He's a year behind you. Okay. And a lot of it seems like there's extended family as well that is part of your legacy as a family. Now, when you guys have family get together, I know how it is in my family. Is optical always comes up at the dinner table towards dessert?
Pretty well, yeah. And I won't make any comments, but somebody decided my glasses weren't straight. And they decided to straighten them out and rip my nose pad off on a Thanksgiving dinner.
Now, who would that have been?
I don't know. It was somewhere on the table anyway.
Funny.
Yes, my sister who is actually a nurse, but hurt her back and started working for my dad in his shop in Pembroke as well. So she had a little bit of optical background, even though she was not an optician. So when we'd get together for family dinners, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and we'd all be talking optics and glasses, and that we did a lot of optical talk around the kitchen table, let me tell you.
You guys go back, you've got quite a history. You've seen a lot of changes in the industry. You guys were part of the drivers of the changes in the industry. You were players. So, Pat, what's your opinion now of the industry? Be kind. But, you've seen so many changes and you know where it's at now because you're still on the front line. Yeah. So when it comes to patient, let's because we don't have time to talk about everything. So what about from a patient standpoint? What's your opinion of a patient who comes in today and how they view what we do compared to maybe years ago and what you're able to offer them?
Well, luckily, I still work for an independent and it's a place of high quality. So I look at the patient coming in and I think they're getting the best service, the best attention they can get. But overall, I fear for the patients because we're seeing so many, I don't want to say chains, but it's get in, get out, get a pair of glasses. And I fear for the patients who actually have ocular disabilities, ocular problems, that in the future, will there be the knowledge and the places to take care of them? When I started off in the business, an optician was respected. People had their optician, that's who they came to see. And they had a question and the optician could answer it, could fulfill their needs. And I'm not sure we're going in that direction today. I see it's becoming a fast food market. And maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I think as the independents start retiring, I'm not sure what the future is going to hold for the younger professionals.
Kevin, I'm going to ask you the similar question, but maybe with a twist, because you actually speak with opticians every day, right? You help them with critical thinking and everything else. How do you see the young generation of opticians going? And maybe what would you recommend to them going forward?
One of the biggest things I could recommend to them is to grasp the technology and move with it. As kind of with Pat's concerns, I see an awful lot of opticians that also though are trying to take themselves to the next level. And I think those are the ones that are really, when they become an independent or take care of their profession, they're going to, they seem, there's a lot that are, they're taking it to a new level, their education, and they're really putting it into play as well. Some of them, as Pat kind of alluded to, that their hands are tied with the independent. They're, working for a big chain or something. But those ones still, seem to rise. And I think if you become an optician, learn, take care, go to all these events and look and learn from the educational seminars, because you can become a higher level optician and you will get the respect of your patients and you will make a practice grow. If you're just one to dispense and, here's your glasses, thanks for your Visa card and go, that's not going to work. You can, if you put on the show and show your knowledge and your professionalism, you will succeed a lot better. And with the new technology of lenses that are coming out from surfacing and designs, I think all manufacturers now are doing a great job in keeping up with or increasing the technology that is actually helping make it even easier to dispense. But you've got to, again, take that extra time and explain to patients what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how it's going to benefit them. It's not just ordering a pair of glasses.
And if I can just clarify, I didn't mean the opticians were the problem. I think the industry has clamped the optician. I think if the opticians, like Kevin said, continue to upgrade, go to conferences, get their education, they're going to be spectacular. It's where they're working that could be the issue. If it's in a place where they just want you to get in and out, then you can't use your knowledge and your technology. So I hope I hope the opticians, who are very smart people, get out there and work for independence and be able to really perform their craft. The education that we get from the association is amazing, and everybody should be attending those lectures.
Well, I think the public today, they have choices. So I think the independent will always be around. The small chains will be around. So some patients want to go get in and out, just like you get some people buying online. I can see. But I think the challenge to opticians to stay relevant, and that is, and I love this term, don't just help people see, but help them see the best they can. And that's the challenge. And the thing we do have that is great for us to have, because we can jump in at any level. If we're really into fashion, we could be in a store that's really into fashion. And fashion does include opticianry, right? Because you got fit and all that. So I think that the public does have a lot of choice. And as you guys are saying, the cream rises to the top with opticians. And I think what I'm hearing you say also is, no matter where you work, educate yourself and be the best you can, and really educate your patient, because patients have to be their own advocates now in healthcare. And I think it's a good challenge for the opticians who are on the front line to play the role of really helping guide people into the eye care sector.
Absolutely. I agree.
Now, maybe this comes out of left field a little bit. And Pat, I've never had the opportunity to work with you, but I got to know you over the years, and I know you're very knowledgeable opticians, and I had the opportunity to work with Kevin. Either of you ever thought about maybe teaching one day? Because I think you guys would be great teachers for opticians, for young opticians, and shaping their mind and everything else. Has that ever been a thought?
I actually did teach for a semester or two at Seneca, but I was just replacing somebody who was away. So it didn't last very long. I enjoyed it. I would prefer one-on-one. I would like to teach a student in my dispensary.
Well, I did one semester at Seneca of teaching as well. I just at that time had way too much on my plate. I had the association, probably, as Lauren said, that day with the one person, just me standing up there. There was too much of that. And I was in the process probably at that point of making the career change to come to the manufacturing side. So I did not pursue it any further. I would love to, I still have, a few opticians that are out there that, you helped me so much. The one-on-one was always great. Going back to a school would be a good thing too, but I do it every day now. When someone has a problem, they call me. We talk about lenses, we talk, about optics and how that prescription is working or not working. And it's a good challenge, and it's a lot of fun helping a colleague satisfy their own patient or their own customer. So I like it that way too.
Well said. Well said. Lauren, did you have any more questions for our guests?
No, because we're running out of time. I could pick a topic, and the four of us could go down that rabbit hole. So I think I'm good. And also, I invite people to read Focus Magazine coming out, which we've a lot of the stuff you heard today will be written up in this article, Building Optical Legacies. And I want to thank you guys, because I know Pat did the work and she talked to you, Kevin, and the family. And you guys were really great in giving me a timeline of the history in your family. I have also, whether you know or not, in the last couple of years, I did an interview with Mark. So I tried to interview all the older guys. I'm an old guy now myself. So I have I didn't record it, but I have it all. I wrote it, took notes, and I have a really neat history of opticianry in Ontario by Mark Raymond. I have it by Robin Searle, and I have it by George Adamson. Little different story there. So these are the pioneers, and your family is truly an optical legacy in Ontario. So I thank you so much for all the work you and your family have done, and you continue to do, because if you're out in the field, you're contributing. You're still contributing. So I thank you very much, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time today to, Kevin, I know you're at work. This is your lunch hour. And Pat, you're taking your day off here to meet with us. We just really appreciate it. Martin and I love it. We just love talking optical, and to get a couple people like yourself to sit down with us. It's cool. Hey, Martin, it really is.
It's awesome because
Absolute pleasure.
we get to meet each other, 2-3 times a year, but we never get the chance for you to sit down and discuss like this. And I just learned some new things today as well that I did not know. So yeah, really appreciate you guys. Appreciate you sitting down with us. Continue doing the amazing work that you guys do, and really looking forward to seeing you guys soon.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll see you at the next event.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All the best.
Well, here's another one, Lauren. Again, two great people, Pat and Kevin Raymond. So such an easy topic, such an easy conversation to have with them. I think it was great. I got to learn a lot of different things that I thought I knew about them, but I did not know at all. What did you think of it today, Lauren?
Well, I really enjoyed speaking in person with them because I've been working with Pat over the last few weeks on my article for the Focus magazine. So I learned a lot more about the history. And also, as we mentioned there, my personal experience with the family goes back to the 80s. And so I've known, I met Jeffrey, which was wonderful. And Mark played a big role in getting me going in the association world. And then with Pat, president of the association when I was a director back in the 80s. Kevin, again, he's such an active role he's played in our association. So I really love sitting down with them. They're so, and again, we talk about podcasts that go easy, and that was just so easy to talk to them. But as we always say, get 4 opticians in a room, we can talk forever. It's just, there's so much to talk about.
Oh, there is. And even prior and after recording the podcast, we've had conversation constantly with them. And we learned some other stuff that wasn't mentioned on the podcast, Lauren.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for people to know what that is. So why don't you tell them?
And before I forget, there's something else that didn't come up in the podcast that we are aware of. And that's that back in the times when the OOA, which was the OADO at the time, I'm not sure the exact timing, financially, the association wasn't doing well. It was before sponsorships with companies, and membership was just a few hundred people, and it wasn't a lot of money. The association had a real heck of a time trying to stay alive. And Pat Raymond and another past president, Marley Summers, they actually put in some of their own money to keep the association afloat. And as we saw, Pat didn't even bring that up, just to show you how humble they are, and she's not going to want the kudos. So I'm hoping she doesn't mind that we're bringing this up. But I really think that they should be acknowledged, Marley's and Pat, for what they did. Again, maybe that's the only reason we're still here today, because they kept the association viable.
They put in their own time, their own energy, and their own personal money to make sure that the association would thrive and exist. And that's one of the reasons why we're talking here today and our 77th anniversary. It's because of people like them, and we couldn't thank them enough for all they did.
Yeah. So I encourage everybody to read the Focus magazine. We go a little more in depth for the family, and you'll learn a little bit more. And I also want to mention, get in touch with us if you know some optical legacies that we should be talking about, because we're always looking for people to interview and people to write about, because again, as we said, we want to document all this rich history that we have.
Absolutely. I mean, you and I we're fortunate that we get to meet a lot of people. We've met a lot of people over the years, but we don't know everybody. We don't know everything that's happened in our optical world, right? So if anybody knows anybody that are worthy of being mentioned for building optical legacies, please forward it to us. So we'd love to know the story. We'd love to have a conversation with these people as well.
There we go, Martin. As we always say, there's another one in the can.
Yes, there you go. Thank you so much to EssilorLuxottica Canada for sponsoring this podcast today. We're really appreciative of EssilorLuxottica Canada. They are great sponsors of the OOA. So again, thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you to our listeners. And until next time, to see what we see with Lauren and Martin. Take care, Lauren.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to See What We See. This podcast is brought to you by the Ontario Opticians Association. For more information or to become a member, go to our website at www.ontario-opticians.com. For all the latest updates, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Ontario Opticians Association, on Twitter, OOA_frontline, and on LinkedIn, Ontario-Opticians-Association. Don't miss an episode of See What We See and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite streaming service. Thank you from the Ontario Opticians Association, the voice of opticians for 75 years.